Hello and welcome back to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your award-winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. If you are new, you can of course find us on YouTube and across all major audio platforms, including iTunes and Spotify. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram and X. And we have got a cracking show in store for you tonight. I'm delighted to say that we are joined by a phenomenal guest this evening, Mike McGrath, a football reporter from the Daily Telegraph. Mike, every Tottenham fan knows your name at this point, but we're really looking forward to having you on and talking about Spurs tonight. But first of all, it's been a very busy summer for you. You were away at the Euros with your colleague Matt Law, and of course the transfer window is getting really busy at the moment. So how are you getting on and keeping up to date with all the football?
Yeah, it's been good. I had to switch the phone off after the Euros for a week. It was just like it was pretty intense. We thought England were heading out kind of early in June, early in the tournament, and it ended up going all the way. So after that, I think it was actually probably the right time to have a break because there wasn't too much happening post Euros. I've just pretty much got back into it this week, and it's getting a little bit busier. I think we've got the season starting a week on Friday, so I think it's gonna hot up and it's gonna be quite exciting before then.
Yeah, and as we were just saying off air there, it's come around really fast. You don't get the break that you would expect in the summer with a major tournament like this. And I think the transfer window has kind of gone in a similar way. The way it's just kind of meandering along for a little bit, aside from the PSR deadline day at the end of June, rather, that we kind of come to know it as. But things are getting really busy now, and Tottenham are looking to be right in the centre of that. Before we go on and look at the future business, I want to ask you about the business that Tottenham have done. And we're now less than 2 weeks away from our opening game of the Premier League campaign against Leicester. It's on Monday, the 19th of August. So far, the permanent players we've managed to bring in this summer are Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall, and they joined Timo Werner, who came in on a loan deal this summer as well. Postecoglou himself has said that there is a lot of business to do in terms of incomings, but outgoings will also be vital, with the most recent ones being Pierre-Emile Højbjerg moving to Marseille and loans out for Bryan Gil and Alejo Velez. What have you made of the business that Tottenham have done so far this window? And I suppose, have you been surprised there hasn't been more done in terms of incomings?
I probably have been a bit surprised that there hasn't been a bit more, but I suppose Tottenham have pretty much been in keeping with the rest of the league, really. They've kind of kept the powder dry for a bit. And I mean, if you think about the big deals, there hasn't been that many. I think Yoro was out of the blue, maybe a little bit opportunistic in terms of United moving quickly and could get something done for a bit of a special young player. Conor Gallagher maybe pushed out a little bit even, or pressurised to leave. It seemed like he wasn't going to get a chance there. Tottenham, I suppose, they've been linked with him as well, but it looks like Atletico Madrid. It's not been like a manic one, so I think it's almost in keeping with the rest of the Premier League, what Spurs have done. I think maybe they were a bit opportunistic themselves in terms of Archie Gray. Remember that weekend? It was an England game actually, and I can't remember which one. Maybe the Switzerland one, and then Brentford moved for Archie Gray pretty quickly, which kind of caught a few people on the hop up here in Yorkshire. Even I don't think some of the Leeds guys kind of saw it coming, but he's that type of player that I think quite a few of the bigger teams in the Premier League looked at Archie Gray, or have seen what he's done in the last kind of 18 months. Since I think it was with Bielsa he started, and just thought, right, I think it's the right one to move for, which Tottenham did really, I think, swiftly, and then so that I kind of saw that as kind of an opportunistic deal, younger ones that they've gone for, and I think that and Werner was obviously a fairly easy one to do. So yeah, maybe a little bit surprised that they haven't moved a bit quicker, but certainly not out of keeping in what else has been happening.
Yeah, and I think Postecoglou has kind of in the past been clear that he wanted deals done early this summer, but he's alluded himself to the fact that it just hasn't been easy, and in a lot of cases hasn't been possible to do that this summer. And he's made no secret of the fact either that he needs new signings on top of what has already come in. And on the point of new recruits, he was quoted during pre-season as saying, "We've got a strategy in place about what we want to do. I'm really happy with the two lads we've brought in, both obviously very talented, but more importantly, really ambitious. They're not here to ease their way in. They want to play, and I think that's great. They brought a good energy to the group, and no doubt there will be a couple of more additions, but I'm comfortable with where we're at." He went on to say, "I don't think it'll all get done in this window. I've never believed in quick fixes, and I think I said that it would have been great to get our business done early, but I've always maintained a discipline not to go off and sort of get too emotional through these times." Now, looking at the squad and the work that could be done, I think it's fair to say the Australian could do with new players in a number of departments, particularly an attacking player too, which is something Tottenham seem to be working on as a priority. Also maybe a midfielder and a bit more depth in defence. I suppose he's given us a bit of an insight when he said that a striker was the focus, but are those areas of the pitch kind of where Tottenham are directing most of their focus now?
Yeah, I think that probably does nail it in terms of what they need. The striker is obviously going to be the big purchase for any club, and particularly one that 1 year ago sold Harry Kane to Bayern Munich. I think that's a really interesting position, which I'm sure you want to kind of talk about later. But I think there will be, they're strong in a few areas, but I think that those ones that you suggested would be the ones that they're looking at, and the ones that Ange just suggested, and some backup fullbacks as well. But certainly getting that striker right, I think it's like the toughest job in recruitment, to get that number 9, to buy one. Although Tottenham, I suppose, didn't buy one when Harry Kane arrived in the first team, because he was already hit. But yeah, so that'll be a big one if they can get that right. I think you might even say that the window gets judged on whether you get those forward positions right.
And before we do go into the names there on incomings and outgoings, because like I said, there's definitely a lot to dive into. I want to dive a little bit deeper into Tottenham signing of Yang Min-hyuk. The 18-year-old was confirmed last Sunday to be joining Tottenham in 2025 from Gangwon in Korea, after he sees out the rest of his title race in K-League 1. He's actually since gone on today to win his 4th consecutive Young Player of the Month award, which is a record for the K-League. We haven't seen many reports in the media about the fee that Tottenham paid for the youngster. There have been some suggestions in Korea that it's been a record sale, and other suggestions that it's around €4 million. Can you shed any light on how Tottenham got this deal done, and maybe the fee that they might be parting with?
I've been told that the fee is about €4 million, but with an add-on that can take it up to about €5 million, which it's a record for a South Korean player coming into Europe. So a record of sorts. But I think a few of the South Koreans went into China when there was an explosion of cash in the Chinese Super League, so that they were more expensive. But this is certainly a record for going into Europe, and one I think people are really, really excited about in South Korea and probably in North London as well, because like you say, I think that's a record for Young Player of the Month in a row. He kind of got a name among scouts during the World Cup, the Under-17 World Cup. So from what I'm told, that there were offers kind of around the world for him, and kind of people are well aware of his potential. I think what Spurs had as a real draw was Sonny, which shouldn't be underestimated. I mean, every player has to go their own path, but to have Sonny there, from the same part of the world, and what he's done in the Premier League, I think is a huge draw and a huge attraction. I'm told that there were Champions League teams in Europe who offered, but there was also an offer after Spurs had kind of agreed something with Gangwon, and there were also others in the Premier League. I think Fulham looked at him and others as well. But I think Spurs moved quickly, and to get that agreed before anybody else could move was a really, really smart bit of business. I don't know much about I haven't seen him with my own eyes, but told he can play off both flanks. And I quite like some of the footage this week of him learning English, because it's not a given that a player goes to a new country and wants to learn the language. And I think there's some real good signs there. So come January, I think it'll be an exciting arrival. Hi, Matt. So,
Did you have me?
Yeah, I've got you.
Sorry, my connection's after jockeying there. I apologize. I apologize for that. It's almost the shows where Ricky isn't here.
Yeah, that's sorry. Well, there wasn't too much I was going to add there. Just that they've also got, there's another young player out there in the K League which clubs are looking at. A guy called Do-Young Yun, and he's in a very similar boat, hugely talented, but 17, so won't move until he's 18. So I think there'll be clubs looking at him as well. Same boat, some really talented players in that part of the world.
And I think that the signing definitely speaks volumes to the work that Tottenham's recruitment team is putting in at the moment to pick up a young star from Sweden and the Allsvenskan, and 6 months later in Korea in the K League 1. There have been a number of links to young stars around the world. I think it's a really good indication of how Tottenham's recruitment team is working at the moment. And as you say there, if there were other Champions League clubs on the look for this player as well, and Tottenham managed to get in, I think it just also goes to show the commitment that they have to bringing in new players and kind of building that team for the future. As you did mention earlier, Bryan Gil is one player who has moved away from Tottenham this summer. He's got on loan to Girona for the 24-25 season, and he's reportedly signed a new contract with Tottenham that contains a release clause of €15 million. He played quite a small role last season and only made 12 appearances in all competitions, with his progress again hampered by injury. What are your thoughts on the structure of this deal to Girona with the new contract and release clause rather than an option to buy? Is it just a creative way for Girona to have an option to buy, or do you think this might be Tottenham covering all bases to try and get as much cash as they can for Gil in the future?
Yeah, possibly. I think ultimately the loans that Bryan Gil will go on will be shot, for him to be a shop window, because I've never felt that he's quite settled. I wouldn't say that I'm kind of watching every single move of his, but I just kind of think I think that he's probably one that they'd look at or whether they could get. Obviously he's surplus to requirements insofar that he's been allowed out on loan, and I think if they got a good price for him, that in a year's time, that it could be one that they look at. So he's. He's always struck me as really suited to Spanish football rather than the Premier League. That might be really harsh. There are players who are kind of a little bit skinnier like he is that have succeeded, but that's always been kind of my opinion of him. He's never quite convinced any manager really over here to play him regularly, so this could be Girona I think will be a really good move for him.
I think it always speaks volumes as well when you look at the loans that he's had, and it's been Sevilla, it's been Valencia, and it's now been Girona. I think if Tottenham were really committed to helping his development to make it in English football, I think they would have looked a bit closer to home for a move there. So Yeah, I do think it's
Yeah.
it's probably all pointing towards a permanent departure for him. And Sergio Reguilón is probably in a similar boat. He spent the entirety of last season on loan, first at Manchester United as cover for Luke Shaw, and then at Brentford, where he did manage to get himself some Premier League game time once again. But with Destiny Udogie ahead of him in the pecking order in North London, it wasn't enough to make Postecoglou consider him a first-team option. He's out of contract next summer, when he will be able to leave for free if he was to still be on the books at Tottenham. And even in January, he'll be able to negotiate an exit with clubs outside of Europe ahead of the 25 summer window as well. Given that he's turned down a number of offers already this summer as he looks to play European football next season, do you think he will secure a move away before the deadline?
Yeah, most probably. I think like the last two windows, he's probably he's probably fairly sellable in terms of his position. There should be a market for him. I consider him slightly unlucky. In terms of I thought he had a fairly good start at Spurs, to be honest. When he first came, I thought he put in some good performances when I watched him. And then unfortunately United, he's gone there and he's gone into a club pretty much, you could say, if at worst in turmoil last season, and maybe at best, up and down. And they certainly finished on a high without him. And he didn't play that much, and when he did play out of his starts, he was on the losing side more than the winning side. So that didn't really work out for him at United. But I think at his age, there should be a move for him. I can't really. He's never really been in anybody that. I don't think Ange has ever said he's got a chance, has he? But so I would see that one being a departure.
My favourite memory, I think, of Reguilón when he does eventually leave Spurs, beside the whole hand debacle with Jose Mourinho at Christmas a couple of years ago, after we'd initially signed him. At the end of his first season, we found out there was a buyback clause for Real Madrid, and given how well he started, as you mentioned there, we were all terrified that Real Madrid were going to trigger this option. I think it was €30 million, and in hindsight, that would have been an incredible deal for a player who just hasn't been able to kick on. And like you said, Postecoglou hasn't even suggested that there might be a chance for him in the first team, like he has with the likes of Jed Spence, who we will talk about shortly. On the left side of defence, though, Mike, we heard today from Gary Jacob that Tottenham could be looking to bring in a new left-back this summer. Destiny Udogie is in the final stages of recovery from an injury that saw him miss Euro 2024 and all of Tottenham's pre-season games so far. And last season, Ben Davies, Emerson Royal, and even Oliver Skipp deputised at left-back. So I think it's clear that there does need to be strengthening done there this summer. What can you tell us about Tottenham's pursuit of a new left-back at this point?
Well, I can definitely see them go for somebody in that position if Reguilón goes, and like I say, he's not in favour. Personally, I think Ben Davies is really good cover. I think he's homegrown as well, which is an issue for Spurs going into the Europa League and just for every Premier League club. So I think that's decent enough cover. But there is probably the need for left back cover there. It's just a really difficult position to cover off. I mean, England went to the Euros without any fit left backs, and you look at somebody like Chilwell, who's out of favour at Chelsea. Tottenham and Chelsea don't often do business, wages, etc. I don't think there's any kind of really that easy left back deals, particularly if you're going to show the faith that Ange has in Destiny to give him the number 3, metaphorical number 3 shirt, where whenever he's fit, which is what I'd expect to happen. Maybe like Man U, they'd look at Man U in the kind of market for a young cover left back. Maybe that might be something that they look at. That's just me, just kind of talking out loud, really, rather than any information that I've been given. But yeah, I could see them strengthening in that area.
Yeah, I think as well it would fit in with that. the way Tottenham have gone about their recruitment. And I can sit here forever and wax lyrical about some of the signings that Tottenham have made. But when you look at Destiny Udogie, as you mentioned there, and even Pap Sarr, young players who were brought in for a previous manager, but they're working better than you could ever expect for the current manager. It's a long-term strategy, I think, that is working well for Tottenham at the moment, and that a number of other teams are maybe starting to try and go for as well, none more so than Chelsea, of course, with the young signings they're making. Onto the other side of defence, and a deal that is rumbling on for longer than we could have thought. That's Emerson Royal, who I think surprisingly to some was a regular feature in Tottenham's pre-season tour of Japan and South Korea. A K-League All-Star player even said after the game last Wednesday that Emerson Royal is the best player for Spurs, which took a lot of Tottenham fans by surprise. The distance between AC Milan and Tottenham in their valuation of the player is said to be thinning, with the hope for AC Milan to close a deal in the coming days worth around £13 million plus add-ons. Do you think this is a move that will happen, and do you think it's one that suits all parties as well?
I do think it will happen. I mean, I think it's getting really pushed by the player really likes Milan. Milan obviously have an interest there, and that eventually, I'm sure there'll be an agreement between them. And yeah, it's an interesting one. Where he was a bit of a surprise when I remember working on the story when he first arrived, and he was not. Let's face it, he wasn't a Barcelona regular. There was a little bit of Wikipediaing needed. But the guy is also a Brazil international now, and he's. And he's played okay, I think. But if Spurs do get their money back or somewhere near it, which what they paid for him, I think that might be one that could happen, and then they could spend that money elsewhere. So yeah, that's one that I'd expect to happen. It'll be really interesting to see in terms of right backs. I mean, it's just a really interesting situation because Spurs have looked at, in the last kind of couple of weeks, they have been looking at right backs, but also like thrown into the mix is the fact that Jed Spence had, I suppose you'd call it somewhat surprising pre-season, where he's really impressed. When I think some people were reporting that he moved to, or certainly on the brink of a move out to a foreign club. He's been playing, from what I've been told, his attitude's been spot on, and he's actually now an option for Spurs if Emerson goes. Like I say, they have been looking at some Issa Kabore. I mentioned on Twitter the other day. I think a few people have tried to shut. Sorry, but then others have also followed it up today. Other reputable journalists. So there's that, and also, I mean, just one kind of out of left field, I suppose, is Kyle Walker-Peters, who at Southampton, who is seemingly available. He's not playing for them in pre-season, so he's a very interesting case for Spurs because he's not only homegrown, but he's home trained as well, which makes a difference in UEFA competitions, which Spurs are obviously in, and he'd fit one of those roles as well. So there's a real interesting conundrum there for Spurs on what they do, indeed, if they do anything, because of Spence's form, which has kind of come out of the blue a little bit.
Yeah, and just to bring a quote from Postecoglou about Jed Spence, because like I said about Brian Hill, the way he's been loaned abroad, it just seems he's been loaned to be sold. And it seems similar with Jed Spence, with loans to Stade Rennes and to Genoa as well. It didn't really feel like there was any future, but with the way he's performed in pre-season and in training, Postecoglou said, to be fair to him, I think he's been very, very good for us this pre-season. In terms of the way he's trained and his general attitude, I think there's an opportunity for him here for sure. It's just up to the player to take it at this point. I would ask you, Mike, do you think 𝐅𝐺 Gray is an option for Tottenham at right back for next season? He's a natural midfielder, and in pre-season, after playing centre-back for a couple of games because all our first-choice centre-backs were at international tournaments, he moved into his position in midfield. But last season at Leeds, where he really made a name for himself in that team, was when he moved across to right back to help them deal with a number of injuries, one of which ironically was to Jed Spence when he was on loan there. Do you think Tottenham will maybe go with that option of playing Gray and right back, or do you think it's a player for the future that's playing where he's good at and let him develop there?
Yeah. First of all, just on Spence as well. When he signed, just to go back quickly, there's a little known rule actually that you can't get loaned to another Premier League club when you sign for a Premier League club, like he did from the Championship. So the plan was always for him to get loaned out, but they had to wait that first 6 months, and then he went out. He might have been to the Championship. I can't remember. But anyway, there was a delay. He was always meant to be loaned, but I always got the impression that it was loaned for experience rather than to be sold, like you said, for Bryan Gil. But anyway, you were saying about Archie Gray. I always felt, I've watched a fair bit of Leeds actually. I've seen, how excited that that they were, the Leeds folk were about this player from when Bielsa started putting him in first team training. I think he was 15 or 16, just an unbelievable talent. And I just always felt that right back was almost like what Liverpool did with Steven Gerrard when he first started, that he was so young and there were people ahead of him in midfield, but everybody knew the talent, and it was almost a way that he would be in the game. He would be in the game and getting experience without being in central midfield, because I certainly feel that somebody like Archie Gray's talent would certainly see him end up in central midfield for Spurs. So I think personally he can do a fantastic job there as a fullback, but in my eyes be a bit wasted really in terms of the talent that he can run a game and how good he is at his age. He'll only get better. Maybe in the same way that people have arguments about where Trent Alexander-Arnold should play. I think you want to maximise people's talents, which Archie Gray really does have. So I think he's in a great position actually. The fact that he's versatile, a great place, a great situation, and the position is, I'm sure eventually he'll get that position of huge responsibility, which is central midfield, for Spurs in England.
I think it's great as well that he said himself he's happy to play anywhere. He wants to get that experience, but like you say, the midfield is where he's at his best. He's so press resistant. He's so good moving the ball. I think you need to have that in the middle of the park, especially the way the Tottenham play. But we do have another versatile youngster on the other side of defence, and he's one who's a bit further away from the first team, and it's Jamie Donnelly, who's really impressed at left back in pre-season, despite playing in midfield and in that forward line for the Tottenham Academy side last season, where he really shone whatever position he was asked to play in. Championship and League One clubs are rumoured to be queuing up to bring him on loan as we await for a decision from Tottenham's perspective about whether or not he'll actually be in that first team next season, or if he'd be best suited to a loan out. Where do you think we stand at the moment on Jamie Donnelly, and if he could very well be moved on for a year?
Yeah, I can see him being at a Championship club. I was working very closely with my colleague Jason Burt at the Telegraph, who's an absolutely fanatical Oxford fan. And that makes him sound a bit weird, but he really is a big Oxford fan and watches them in his spare time. So he was linked with Oxford, and there was real excitement about what this guy could do. I always thought he'd be a forward, but yourself, sorry, the clock's going. Yourself, you can play in other positions as well. I think with a player like that, Oxford and other Championship teams will obviously be looking at him, and I think he'll have the pick of it. But I think surely he'll go out. I thought that was a given, but I thought he would be a given that he'd go out into the EFL and get some experience and come back. Certainly a player who people think very highly of.
An interesting question here from the chat that I want to bring to you, Mike, because we've plenty to talk about in midfield, and for everyone asking, we will get on to Eze. We will, of course, get on to Dominic Solanke as well. But we have a question here asking about the flow of info coming out of Tottenham compared to other regimes, because I think it's more of a common theme with a lot of clubs this summer, that things tend to be done under the radar, and Liverpool may be a brilliant example of that. But how has it been from a journalist perspective trying to cover Tottenham and work on Tottenham's deals when it seems as though it's a very tight ship being run there at the moment?
There's different personnel. There have been different regimes there recently. Obviously, one chairman has been a constant, but different personnel there and different people working on deals. So there's always going to be, there'll always be changes, I suppose, in how people operate and try and get some stories out of Spurs. I think that as a pack, some of the guests that you have on and others are just absolutely first class journalists, who adapt to any regime really, and always go to and will always find the information and get there. And it's, look, we all want to crack a story and try and be the one that breaks the big one. And to be honest, there's some excellent coverage of Spurs. I could chip in a little bit. I've got other clubs as well, but I could try and chip in on Spurs. But it's really, really, I think there's the standard is really high, and it adapts to different regimes. Different sporting directors are in, different scouts. You're right, there has been a lot of change at Spurs, and with that comes different challenges. But I think still, people still get there in terms of getting the stories and getting really good info, stuff that gets nailed on, that it happens, and sometimes stuff that the club are looking at and don't quite get right, which is still really excellent work. We're every day trying to get more and more.
Thank you very much for that insight. Where the viewers love the footballing insight, I absolutely adore the insights from the journalism perspective and how a transfer window actually works. So thank you very much for that insight. What we are going to do is, for our listeners on audio, we're going to go for our first break of the show. For watching audience live on YouTube, there's nearly 4,500 of you watching live right now. Thank you very, very much for the support. Of course, we are joined by the phenomenal Mike McGrath, the football reporter at the Daily Telegraph, and we've got loads more to come, again, including 𝐅𝐸gh𝐸 𝐂𝐸 and Dominic Solanke, which is every second comment in the live chat at the moment. Before we do move on there, a name that's been linked with Tottenham in the last couple of days, Mike, is Stade Reims midfielder Amir Richardson. The 22-year-old played 28 times in the French Ligue 1 last season, his first in the top division of French football, and he's also featured at the Olympics for Morocco this summer. Do you know if this is one for us to keep an eye on, or is this maybe just another name in a long list of targets that Tottenham could have right now?
I mean, personally, that's not one that I've been working on myself. He's obviously, there's value in that French market, which everybody kind of sees. There's a lot of work that goes down there in terms of recruiting the players, as there has been for many years. And he's, for somebody playing regularly in Ligue 1, you're in a good position. You're in a good position for a move to the Premier League, but it's not one that I've heard is imminent, and maybe not even like the immediate priority in terms of what Spurs are looking at.
Another midfielder's name that was mentioned, admittedly, earlier in the window, and it's kind of faded away in the last couple of weeks, is the name Jacob Ramsey. And Tottenham showed an interest earlier in the summer and even made an offer for the player, which was £20 million plus Giovanni Lo Celso. There's reportedly a growing feeling that Ramsey could be prized away from Villa by a bid of up to £50 million. But of course, any move from a Tottenham perspective is likely to be contingent on Aston Villa accepting Giovanni Lo Celso in part of an exchange deal. Do you think this is something that Tottenham could revisit later in the window, or maybe will the incredible form of Bergvall in pre-season allow Tottenham to reconsider investing in that position this month?
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that would be a difficult one to get, a really difficult deal to get done. That's been my impression of it. Certainly, it's not one where what's the best way to put it? That people are saying, oh yeah, that one will get done later in the window. Do you know what I mean? That's one that's been on the back burner. Whereas you have other players in a situation where you think that one will eventually get done. So look, he's a hugely talented player. I just think the situation that Villa are in, and they've lost Douglas Luiz. I know they brought players in as well, but you would have thought that with the Champions League at Villa Park next season, that they'd be wanting to keep their squad kind of as big as possible. I just felt that was a difficult one for them to get done. Lo Celso is really interesting. Clubs are looking at him. There are clubs looking at central midfielders, which and he's been one of them, probably more in the terms of, I think, intermediaries maybe asking whether clubs are interested in him. So that's one that I could see happening as an out for Spurs. If it's not part of the Ramsey deal that you suggested, then maybe one to another club in England or I mean, he's been back to Spain, hasn't he? But yeah, I think English clubs as well have looked at him.
And another midfield name who could be on the way out is Oliver Skipp. As you were speaking about earlier, with the homegrown and club-trained quota, he's one who fits both of those, but could be on the way out, with Leicester, Ipswich and Southampton being linked to the player today. Do you think Skipp is another one that we should expect to see move on this summer? Yeah,
out of those clubs, I certainly... I've heard myself that Southampton have an interest in Oliver Skipp. Maybe an issue with Southampton is their wage structure. That, despite him being a relatively young player, I think that there would still be a difference there in terms of what his experience and level commands, and what Southampton have got in their budget, having just been promoted from the Championship. Southampton was the strongest in that one. I always get Leeds fans asking me about Oliver Skipp. I think they've always fancied Oliver Skipp, and I've never kind of felt that one was ever close. And certainly with the clubs that he's been linked with, it's Premier League, isn't it? And Ipswich being quite ambitious with their recruitment, I can see, and Leicester have got loads to do as well before the deadline. So I think he'd be quite a good signing for somebody. Actually, I've never felt he's looked out of place or like had a complete stinker whenever I've seen him play in the Spurs colours. But maybe a move to get regular football is what he wants as well.
Yeah, I think Skipp, in a similar way to Højbjerg, is probably just a victim of the style of football that we play right now, because Skipp does offer something. He does offer a lot to a team who need a player of his style. But I think when Spurs are looking for ball progression in midfield and someone with a wider passing range, I'm not sure that's one of Skipp's main strengths. And I completely agree that
when I say maybe he wants to move on, that's just me speculating. I don't know whether he wants to leave, because he's always seemed a very committed Spurs player. That's just me kind of speculating, maybe, then saying that maybe he does want to play 38 games a season rather than being just used as and when. I'm sure he wouldn't let anybody down.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a difficult decision that he just might have to make, similar to Conor Gallagher at the moment. And I completely agree that the Premier League is the level. He had one season in the Championship when he was on loan at Norwich a couple of years ago, before he ever became a regular Tottenham player. And he was incredible in that league, maybe even the best player that season. He won a lot of Man of the Match awards, which I'll admit were hijacked by Tottenham fans in the online voting, but he still won them. Moving on to one of the names that everyone is asking about, I think everyone will be happy that we're going to talk about it now, and that is Eberechi Eze. And he's a name that's almost haunted Tottenham fans for the duration of this window so far. He's reportedly a key target for Tottenham, and the club have not been put off by his release clause, which is set at around £60 million. I think the main stumbling block that we're seeing here, Mike, is that any club will need to be prepared to pay a considerable amount of that £60 million up front, which is, of course, the power that Palace have as a selling club with that release clause. But they now may also be in a position where they can refuse to entertain any offers below the release clause. They've already sold Michael Olise to Bayern Munich for over £50 million this window, and they could be about to lose Mark Gahey to Newcastle for £60 million. I think losing 2 of their key players this summer is bad enough, but to lose 3 would be catastrophic for Oliver Glasner as he moves into his first full season as Crystal Palace manager. But at this point, how realistic do you think a move for 𝐅𝐵 Eze to Tottenham might be?
Well, it's like you say, they had the 3 kind of crown jewels there, and 2 of them, one's gone, one has been subject to a bid. Eze was always the one that people thought was least likely to move quickly out of that, out of Palace, and certainly I think it'll be it'll be devastating for them to lose all of them. So I was just getting another call, but I was just with Eze, I thought that I've always thought that the main kind of competition, the main stumbling block would be other clubs actually, in terms of that he is at a level where I think a Champions League team would look at him. I saw him play for England and I thought he was excellent in terms of discipline and positional discipline, and he could play at fullback right the way up to forward. And for Palace, when he's been on the pitch fit, he just glides past players. Really excellent forward who I'm sure would fit into Tottenham and many other teams. I think there'll be plenty of competition. When it gets going on that one, I could probably see him do another window at Palace, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's not really in Daniel Levy's playbook to give in to Palace's demands and pay that money up front. And I think what does confuse fans a little sometimes is that we might see a release clause of 60 and Tottenham end up paying 65, which is usually a way to pay a lower amount up front. Yeah, more in the long term, but it's a much easier deal for the club to pursue. So hopefully that's something that the Palace will be open to negotiating on this summer, and potentially the only way that Tottenham could actually manage to get a deal done. And indeed, maybe any other clubs, because £60 million up front is certainly a lot of money. Another forward player that Tottenham have been heavily linked to this window is Pedro Neto. And there's reports that Tottenham are the most concrete suitor for the Wolves winger, although Man City's name has also been mentioned in the last few days, like it has been for 𝐅𝐵 Eze. Tottenham see Neto being worth in the region of £45 million, but Wolves could potentially want over £60 million. And this is despite the 24-year-old's injury record being a real cause for concern, having missed 108 games in total since making the move to Molineux from Lazio. I think we can all agree there's little doubting Neto's quality when he is fit and available, but I suppose the same question as last time. How realistic do you think it could be for Spurs to bring in Pedro Neto this summer?
I think he's a player that I think Wolves will eventually lose. I worked on the Man City end of that story last season, and certainly there's interest there. One of the players that they're monitoring, I think the injury problems that he's had is an issue. I think Liverpool as well have looked at him, although at the time of that I was working on that was before they had a change of director of football and a new manager. So I'm not quite sure where that is really with them, but certainly that's the type of level of club that I have been looking at, and Tottenham, of course. And I do think the injury problems that he's had, they've been well documented, but nobody's ever kind of said, that's, we wouldn't, I don't think a club would go there because of it. And I can see Spurs being in the mix for him, as and when he becomes available, and there's a bit of, and clubs start jostling for him.
Just from a personal perspective, Mike, do you think it would be a failure for Tottenham if they end this window without one of 𝐅𝐵 Eze or Pedro Neto? I think, having spent a lot of the summer looking at the different reports and the different links, I feel as though these two deals are one that's maybe been perpetuated more by the fan base than by actual concrete links, which I'm sure is a consequence of the less info that is coming out of the club. But do you think Tottenham need to make a statement signing like that in this window?
I think there's to get a number, a proper number 9 would be a statement signing as well. I just think with those type of players, there is intense competition for somebody like Eze. It would be intense competition. I think you'd probably be beating yourself up and the club up a bit if you felt it was a failure that they didn't get one of those two. We're talking about proper, elite players who Spurs would be among 6 or 7 who could probably afford it and be attractive enough for a player like that. So I don't think it'd be devastation if and it shows how good they are as well, that there will be competition for them.
I think any failed transfer is seen as devastation from a lot of Tottenham fans. So it's one that we may have to deal with in our live chat for a few months after. Before we do get on to the striker situation, one last winger I want to ask you about is Manor Solomon, and he today has been linked with a move away on loan. Some reports that clubs in Spain, Germany, and indeed England are interested in taking him on a loan deal, and it was a nightmare opening season for him at Tottenham, being out injured for the vast majority of the season. But he's back in pre-season, he's fit, and he's playing. Do you think he will be playing somewhere else next season?
Yeah, maybe that does work for him in terms of he's not going to get 25 plus games for Spurs. Maybe that would work if he went abroad and got those games elsewhere. I think that when from where he was when he was at Fulham, and so I think he was. He showed exactly, the type of, what he can produce. And it's just, like you say, just been really unlucky in terms of the injuries. You say it's just been the one event, hasn't it, really? It's been the one injury that's held him back. So, that's one where I can see if he can get games elsewhere, that might be a departure.
Well, what we are going to do is we'll go for a second break of the show for listeners on audio. When we come back, we'll be speaking to Mike about the future of Richarlison and Tottenham's potential signing of Dominic Solanke. For our watching audience live on YouTube, there's over 5,200 of you watching live right now. Thank you so much for the support. We are joined by Mike McGrath, the football reporter from the Daily Telegraph. And let's get into it, Mike. And let's talk about Richarlison first, because there's been long links between him and Saudi Arabia that have kind of refused to go away throughout the duration of the summer, despite Richarlison earlier suggesting that he will stay in England and wasn't open to a move to Saudi Arabia at all. However, the latest reports suggest that maybe the Brazilian has changed his mind with regards to a move to Saudi Arabia, and reports in Saudi suggesting that Al Ahly have actually already agreed a deal with Tottenham and made progress in their talks with the player, although that is believed to be slightly premature at this point in time. He's not proved value for money since his 60 million transfer from Everton in the summer of 2022. And the opportunity for Tottenham to get back that money would probably be too good to turn down. What do you think the probability is of Richarlison leaving White Hart Lane this summer?
I'm quite a bit of a Richarlison fan, actually. So I really like watching him play. And kind of value for money, I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit more time for him to prove his fee that was paid to Everton. We've been working at the Telegraph. We worked on this story for, I think it was the January window, where there was a little bit of there was a late push for him from Saudi. I can't remember if it was myself or Matt Law did it at the time, but certainly around March time, the word was that they're still there and they'd come back for him. I think it was a really late shout, a late inquiry that was kind of knocked back. I don't think Spurs had any time to get somebody in if they did sell. If that interest, like you say, and like we've reported, is still there, I think, like many players. And by the way, the budgets are just getting done as well for Saudi, so we will find out quite soon when bids go in. But there's you need to get your head around it as a player to get to play out there in a very different environment. For a PIF club, I think it's really different to a non-PIF club. you had somebody such as Jordan Henderson who didn't last very long there, and other players who seem really, really settled there. I think, like Riyad Mahrez seems like he hasn't looked back since moving there. So it's really like, I think it's definitely comes to the players' mentality. I always thought Richarlison would end up there, to be honest, but still, it does feel removed from kind of how important the Premier League is. That might just be me being biased because we watch it every week and we think it's the greatest league ever, and the Saudis probably think that they're building something that we maybe can't see, but yeah, I think he's still got legs in the Premier League and he can still do a job for Spurs. He's Brazil's number 9. He's still an asset. Personally, I think that I would like to see him stay in the Premier League, but like I said, there is interest there.
It'll be really interesting to see how it does pan out, because like I said, there was an expectation that he wouldn't be open to a move to Saudi Arabia, but maybe he's had his head turned, and maybe the reality that he won't be the main striker for Tottenham next season could be something that plays into that as well. And that brings us nicely onto the man who is at this point probably expected to be the main striker at Tottenham next season, and that is Dominic Solanke. He's one name on what a couple of weeks ago was a long list of striker targets for Tottenham, but the latest reports suggest that the player has accepted the move to Tottenham as the club seek to agree a deal with Bournemouth. It's something they're pushing on at the moment. Maybe a little bit of discrepancies in a few reports, with some today suggesting that there actually hasn't been any talks between the clubs yet, but Solanke was left out of the squad for Bournemouth's pre-season friendly against Rayo Vallecano on Sunday. His release clause, in a similar way to 𝐅𝐸𝐻𝐸 𝐂𝐻𝐧𝐭, is probably the biggest stumbling block here, with that clause up to £65 million. But as I was saying earlier, we do understand that Tottenham will try to negotiate a lower initial fee for that. What can you tell us about the state of play on Tottenham's pursuit of Solanke?
So I think what I've been told is Spurs had a short list of about 4 strikers, Solanke being one of them, and certainly in the last few days, the people I've been talking to, kind of, it points towards them working on that. I've not heard of any kind of detail on club to club, or like you say, but just that this is one that people have been talking about as one that they've been looking at. My personal view on the deal is that it's a very un-Daniel Levy deal in terms of his age and what he would be worth in 4 years' time. That something more attractive to Spurs would be a bit younger. However, he's got pedigree in the Premier League. Last season he was clearly his best season yet, and he seems to be in the kind of peak of his career at the moment. So I don't doubt that he would do the job for any Premier League club, to be honest, that goes for him. I think Spurs were it just is a surprise to me, that profile. I wouldn't have been surprised if they were looking at somebody like the one that the Chelsea striker, the striker that Chelsea have been looking at, Samu. That to me, in my eyes, was more of a kind of Spurs type of player, or even somebody with maybe just like a year left to go on their contract, like Jonathan David or somebody. But certainly, those names are not who I've been kind of hearing in the last few days. It's kind of been Solanke, really. So I don't know whether it's going to happen. I suppose the next step will be whether there's been any progress on the work that Spurs have been made. I think for a player, he'd probably be one of the best around that kind of isn't an England regular, but I suppose you could say who is an England regular as a number 9 with Harry Kane around. but he certainly, I thought he was really pushing last season to be included among those players like Watkins and Toney who were kind of knocking on the door for England.
Do you think Solanke is an improvement on Richarlison? I think that's kind of the main concern that some Spurs fans have at the moment. And looking at the stats for last season, Solanke outscored Richarlison by 8 goals. He had more shots on target. He was better in the air. And of course, there is with that very important caveat that he played a lot more minutes. But you could, I suppose, go the other way and say for Richarlison, it was very much a purple patch that got the goals for him. He scored 10 and 10 after coming back from injury with just 1 goal then for the rest of the season. So I think the profiles, the type of players are definitely very different. And maybe, in my opinion, that's what swayed Tottenham towards making the change. But do you think quality-wise that it is an improvement for Spurs?
I think quality-wise, probably comparable, both excellent Premier League players. I think Richarlison sometimes might suffer from wearing his heart on his sleeve. If he's moody, we kind of know it, rather than a player who just like gets on with it if something goes wrong, and Solanke has a consistency in his performances and his kind of body language, and which Richarlison might not have, but Richarlison might have those moments which he can produce, which others might not. So I think they're comparable, really. But maybe in terms of that reliability, consistency, Solanke was certainly showing it really well last season.
A couple of the other names that were on that list for Tottenham throughout the summer included Victor Gyökeres, Ivan Toney, Jonathan David, and Lois Openda. The surprise for me is that there's very different profiles there and very different levels of investment that will be required for if any of those have been identified as a main target. And Postecoglou himself said recently, I think for us what's more important is the type of striker we get. We play a certain way. We demand certain things from a physical perspective, from the technical aspects of it, that it's going to be a striker that fits that mould. And he referenced Kyogo Furuhashi, who was his main number 9 at Celtic and played a very specific role and did so really successfully for Celtic. But looking at those names, Gyökeres, Toney, David and Openda, is that an accurate reflection of the main targets that Tottenham had identified this window? And if something goes wrong with Solanke, do you think maybe Tottenham could go back in for one of those?
I suppose attainable number 9s is like the common theme. Ivan Toney, is a year to go. Like I say, with Jonathan David a year to go, they're kind of the ones that people might think, Daniel Levy would look at and think, right, that's value for what's in the market. Gyökeres has always been a difficult one to bring back for some reason, that people always kind of see stumbling blocks in terms of getting him from Sporting, and would certainly kind of regret not getting him when he was at Coventry. So I think, look, it shows you that it's the most difficult market, getting a number 9, and that clubs will look at anything they can and see it availability as well. Openda, I didn't know that Spurs were into the Openda. I saw him play against Man City and he did very, very well last season. More of a kind of slippery forward, really. But I think he scored twice against them when I saw him. At least scored 1 very good solo goal. I think he would be a really good player in the Premier League for someone.
I had a dream last week that we signed Lois Openda, so I think that's my main target right now. I think someone was telling me something that we could go back in there. With all these names that we're seeing linked in the forward line, there has been a bit of frustration among Tottenham fans that maybe Ange Postecoglou isn't looking to give time to some of the young players next season, and that the main name, the one we're most excited about at the moment, is Mikey Moore. And he turned 17 on Sunday, and reports say that he is set to sign his first professional contract on the day of his 17th birthday, believed to be a 3-year deal, which is the longest you can do for a player under the age of 18. He's widely regarded as one of the most exciting young talents in England at the moment, with interest from Borussia Dortmund and I think Real Madrid, to name a couple of clubs, in the last few years. And the opportunities afforded to him by Ange Postecoglou, not only last season, but with the minutes he's played in pre-season, suggest he might be very close to becoming a regular first-team squad member. Do you expect the fast-tracking of his journey to Premier League football to continue?
Well, I've heard a lot of young names down the years, but this guy has got, people are saying he is the absolute real deal, and that Spurs are wrapping him up in a bit of cotton wool and getting him really ready to be part of their first team, rather than some of the other pathways that you see, like to sell him or to or whatever it might be to maximise that he is the real deal. So if there's one chance, that he might be a kind of type of Phil Foden type that they would really nurture and kind of have a look at kind of easing into the first team. Because at 17, I don't think, if you got 10 starts in a season, I think you'd be absolutely ecstatic and you'd be on the right path. And things can happen quite quickly in the next few seasons for him. So yeah, he's definitely, I know we have a real tendency to big up young players, but he certainly is one that people have been talking about, before I even kind of knew what the guy looked like. People are saying that there's a proper talent there, that Tottenham are doing everything that they possibly can to make sure he's with them.
It's certainly biased to me to say it, but I think he's in a very good place to continue that development, not only with a manager who puts trust in young players, but learning from Son, from James Maddison, from Dejan Kulusevski, and being now in a setup that is geared towards developing these young talents and bringing them in from around the world. I think he, of course, has a massive future, and I'm hoping, like the 6,000 watching are, that will all be in a Tottenham shirt. Mike, I want to thank you very, very much for your time tonight and your insight on the business that Tottenham have done and look to be doing this window. Before we do wrap up, I want to ask you your thoughts on Tottenham in the season ahead, with missing out on Champions League football last season, agonisingly only by a couple of points in the end, and the trophy drought now extending to 16 years. What do you think the target should be for Spurs in their second season under Postecoglou?
I think, look, they're in good company on Thursdays. There's United and Chelsea playing on a Thursday. It's not the end of the world. They're big clubs that are in the Europa or indeed the Europa Conference, like Chelsea. And I think for Spurs, I always felt that to win a trophy would be is amazing for the club because of their rich history in the cup competitions. And since they did win those FA Cups and stuff, maybe the competition has kind of diminished a little bit. But I've always thought that Spurs to win something, since the days of Juan de Ramos would be a real special occasion, because it's competitive. It's competitive up there to get into the top four, and to get into the top four is like a trophy. I know Arsene Wenger got criticised for saying that, but it is a real achievement to get in there, like Villa did last season, like Spurs have done the season before, and like Spurs can do again. And I think if they do win a trophy or get in the top four, I think that would be like, people will be remembering 2025, as a very special season.
We'll certainly keep our fingers crossed for that. I think more than the elation of winning a trophy, just getting the opposition fans to quieten down for a couple of years would give us some much needed respite. Again, Mike, thank you so much for your time tonight. We really have appreciated and enjoyed having you on. Can you let our viewers know where they can find you and follow your work?
Yeah, so I'm on X, formerly known as Twitter, at McGrath Mike, and it's also the Telegraph website as well. You see all the work from all our writers there.
Well, look, everyone, there's over 6,000 of you watching right now. Do make sure to go over and follow Mike to keep up to date on his work, and hopefully some good news for Tottenham in the window over the next month or so. From Last Word on Spurs, we do want to take this opportunity to remind you that the Football Content Awards nominations for 2024 are now open. You were phenomenally kind to us with your support last year when you helped us bring home the Silver Award for the best podcast in the Premier League. But this year we want to go one step further, and we, of course, need your help for that. So to nominate us for the Best Podcast Premier League Award, you can scan the QR code or go to the link in our bio where you can fill out the form. And again, just type Last Word on Spurs in the Best Podcast Premier League section. We would really appreciate all of that support. And hopefully it can be the gold this year, just like it may be for Tottenham as well. Thank you, everyone who has tuned in. Like I said, there's over 6,100 of you still watching at this point. The support on the channel has been incredible over the last couple of weeks, and we really do appreciate it all. We'll be back soon with some show at some point. I'm sure it's all very, very busy, so we'll let you know on X as soon as we do have another show coming up, so make sure to follow us there as well. But for now, from me and from Mike, thank you so much for watching, and as always, come on you Spurs.